been in a situation where you knew you were ready for something? You knew you wanted to be more than what people were giving you credit for. You'd prepared despite the fact that people didn't think you were ready. And when that opportunity presented itself, you failed. And how did you respond to that failure? And did the response to that failure help to determine how you might act in the future? This is the story of young Washington. This is the idea, the primary idea behind this movie from Angel Studios, starring William Franklin Miller as George Washington, as a young, very young version of George Washington. We're talking about 1755 here, 20 plus years before the Declaration of Independence, and even more before he is our first president of the United States. This is Millrod. Welcome back to another Brews and Reviews. Tonight, the Brews and Reviews is going to be a Molson Canadian. So that's going to be the Brews for the review. Just came out of the theater from Young Washington, and I can tell you, as somebody who loves history and has served in a local city council, so appreciates the work of public servants, this movie got me so excited. First of all, it's cool to see Angel Studios starting to do some of this historical stuff. I was excited just because I love George Washington. I love the revolutionary period of our history. I love, just learning and reading and soaking in what these young people were able to accomplish to start a new country. And so as somebody who's, a very patriotic person, loves this period of history, this was a treat to be able to go see young Washington. I will say, my love for history and my appreciation for the character of George Washington kind of pulled me through this movie in some ways, and pulled me beyond what was, in some areas, kind of a sloppy, awkward movie in some ways. The movie starts off with Washington as a young child, and you kind of see him very quickly grow up, but unfortunately a lot of the lines are pretty rigid. They're a little bit awkward. The acting seems kind of rote, and it kind of feels that way throughout the entire movie. A lot of the exchanges feel very awkward, feel very set up. They don't feel very natural in a lot of ways, especially when Washington is a child. You can kind of get this feeling. And then they do this kind of dreaded Aragon scene from the Aragon movie where Washington goes from a boy to old while riding a horse in one fell swoop, kind of like Aragon and Sapphira in the Aragon movie. And so the pacing is a little bit quick. The dialogue is a little awkward. There are times in this movie where the camera, when they're in the woods and we're looking out towards a scene, what's supposed to be kind of a scenery or scenic area, it tends to get very grayed out in almost like a blue light tint, and so some of the camera work, was a little bit awkward. However, saying all of that, because I do think when you see this movie, you will find that there's a lot of dialogue, a lot of it is kind of awkward and rote. And some of the scenes just feel a little bit empty in some ways. But again, I doubt this movie has as big of a budget with Angel Studios as something from a larger studio. And so I can forgive a little bit of the space issues. But what was very apparent was kind of some of this kind of very clunky dialogue along the way. Now, I will say, as the movie continues, you start to see Washington grow up, and I don't think William Franklin Miller did a bad job. I think he did a good job as young Washington. I think he was charming. I think he was very bold. I think he had that kind of tough mentality, that kind of intellectualism that Washington shows in his younger life. And the resolve at the end and the way that he acted through kind of some of these final battle scenes was really inspiring. I really liked that. And again, the story of the movie is, Washington being overlooked, not being from the top class of society, not being a soldier himself. Him trying to push in. There's a part of the movie where he essentially breaks into an area where he shouldn't be able to talk to people at a higher stature. The movie has this Americanism in it of you're not locked into your stage in life. You can be born someone with very few means and not a lot of resources, and you can rise up to, be the head of a large army and be a president of the United States, and or in the modern times be a great business person or a doctor, an engineer, or a teacher, or any career that you want. And that's a very American dream idea. And you can tell the folks at Angel wanted to connect this current idea of the American dream to the story of Washington. And so you see him break these barriers to work his way up. You see him fail and then come back through the help of his mother. And I'll be honest, Mary Louise Parker, who played Mary Washington, was excellent. I actually thought she was the best actor in the film. I thought her performance was the best of everyone's. But Washington gets pushed back into it and eventually, helps to lead the army towards the end. And we get this awesome fight scene where he goes back for his troops. So there's a lot of really great Americanism, a lot of positivity, redemption, punching through barriers, and there's some great action scenes in this where Washington leads his troops out of pretty dire situations. And so I liked it. I would probably see it again, not right away. Some of the issues with it, like I said, was just kind of some clunky dialogue. Some of the movie gets a little boring because you're just sitting there listening to this clunky dialogue, kind of over and over again. The movie definitely is better in the third act, in my opinion, when we get into more of these battle scenes and you see Washington's true grit, kind of come out. But again, I think if you're wanting to see a movie to celebrate the 4th of July, if you're a history buff that likes this period of time, you definitely get the setting and the pomp and circumstance of being in the nobility, or nobility, so to speak, back then. And if you like a story of someone pushing through, and I like to call it punching above their weight, that's Washington in this. So if you like those things, I think you'll like this movie. But be ready for some clunky dialogue, some awkward scenes, some kind of odd, you're in this big battle and there's only 5 soldiers standing around, or 6 soldiers or something, so you can tell that the budget is a little bit lower here. But overall, interesting film, cool film, very American film, and one that you'll leave appreciating the story of young George Washington. That's the cool thing, too, about this movie, is that most of us know George Washington as the leader of the American Revolutionary Army and then first president of the United States. That's the story that we know. What we don't know is this 1755 story of Washington. And so it is cool to see a studio kind of try to tackle that and tell you that story, that more unknown story. Again, I think that maybe makes it a little more boring at times, but also I think you have to appreciate it. And you have to appreciate what Washington went through to get to the position of leadership that he ultimately gets to at a very, very young age. So if I had to kind of sum up my thoughts, I'm going to do kind of a 5-point scale on this channel. 1 and 0 being very bad, kind of 3 being just wasn't for me, but it might be for you, and then kind of 4 and 5 being a good movie, and 5 being I want to go back and watch it right now. And so if I had to give this film a score, I'd probably give it a 3.5 out of 5. It was fine for me. It did everything it needed to on the 4th of July. It taught me about George Washington. The end was great in these final battle scenes, but the movie definitely lacked in its dialogue and in some of its pacing, particularly when Washington is transitioning from being young to being old, kind of in the first act of the movie. So 3.5 out of 5 for me for young Washington, but again, an excellent, excellent, excellent display of what it means to be an American and rise, above your stature through your own grit and determination, and that's the true American dream. This is Millrod. Thanks so much for watching another one of my brews and reviews. Again, Molson tonight. Have a great 4th of July and a great rest of your day.